This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit.
Thanks, guys. Back to you.
So we're back for another one of these, I presume. I say this as if I need someone to validate it. No, it is the real deal. It's another Friday, which means it's time for another classic installment to the Five Starr Wrestling Report. Yay. I gotta see if I have some of those artificial canned kids that are cheering. I think iMovie has those imported somewhere. If you're a returning viewer, you know what you're in for. Don't worry, it's not Retro Raw. I won't be screaming into the microphone about how horrible these shows are. Those are for the Monday podcasts. And we talk about those god-awful 1995 Raws, and then we top it off with talking about how delusional people were when they thought that NXT in 2014 was the bomb. It was certainly a bomb of some description. A diarrheal explosion of a bomb, perhaps. I still haven't watched either show for the week, so who knows? Maybe I will immediately eat those words. And judging the way Raw's been for the past 4 months, I presume nothing will change there. But for now, first off, make sure you subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. We're on YouTube and Rumble every Monday and Friday for new content. As per normal with these shows, we'll segue into the Crockett reviews. I understand there's a bunch of other drama happening in the wrestling world right now outside the stuff we're currently covering. If I actually cared enough to give AEW the attention they're desperately seeking, I'd probably go more into detail about the whole Brawlin scandal, the video footage they aired on Dynamite. You know, I gotta be honest, I think everybody's pretty much spoken the cold hard truth at this point. The level-headed fans, that is. In my opinion, is no different from anybody else's. It was dumb. It was a desperate ploy to ratings grab because Dynamite's ratings have been in the toilet for months. So allegedly they got an average of 30,000 extra viewers than what they were typically doing? Yay. It's so what? You know, the ratings are just going to go back down the following week. Nothing will change. It's AEW. They've been a blip on the radar since 2019. And with the way that company's horribly operated, it'll continue to be a blip on the radar. So there's your 5-second AEW recap for the month. There's that attention you guys were seeking. Hope it was all worth it. I really do. But let's get on to the more important stuff. Well, the Midnight Rider has arrived. Riding in on his cavalry, so to speak. And by that, I mean Old Yeller. And as you might imagine, the Horsemen are very much agitated by this whole ordeal. The ongoing story is that all the heels are sharp, astute observers. They all know who the Midnight Rider is. but it's the babyface locker room plus the announcers that are playing dumb, and they're refusing to acknowledge the truth. So they inform us that the Horsemen would be out to speak their minds later on. Not before Jim Cornette came out to speak his mind and crack some coma jokes, saying that David Crockett finally woke up from a coma over the week. He got up in the middle of the night to get a cup of water, but the cup fell on his head. Aren't concussion jokes hilarious, people? They sure are. By the way, that was the entirety of Jim's promo, right before he introduced the Midnights. In his efforts to come up with something clever for his 5-second promo, he thought, I've got it. I'll make a brain damage joke. That'll get over with the people. So it's the Midnights versus Trent Knight and George South. And during this match, Jim was doing an amazing job talking about all the potential heel teams in the Crockett Cup they could potentially have to face off against. And the extent of the conversation was, well, we'll beat every last one of them to get the $1 million, but then we'll kiss and make up in the end. He said that if the Midnights wind up facing the Varsity Club, after the Midnights win, of course, they will donate some of their money to a psychotherapist so all the members of the Varsity Club can get proper therapy. Because clearly the Midnights do not want to stir the pot. It's all about friendly competition, after all. Sure, they'll gladly beat the shit out of every last team in the company for $1 million. But if they're heels, well, they can still be friends afterwards. This is back when wrestling was great, by the way. Oh yeah, and there was a match going on during all this. I don't remember what happened. Ian and Condrey won with a rocket launcher. That's all I got out of it. And then we had Corny's follow-up promo. He's doing the off-the-wall, crazed heel rant on the Fantastics, talking about how much he's looking forward to whipping the Fantastics with his leather belt. He wants to hear him squeal and moan and beg for mercy. I mean, the guy's legitimately turning like 100 different colors in the span of 3 seconds. And meanwhile, somewhere during all of this deep-rooted, vile hate speech, talking about how much he loathes the Fantastics and everything they represent, Corny just casually throws him, by the way, we wrestled the Fantastics for 42 minutes in so-and-so town last night, and it was a great match. Never a dull moment during a Jim Cornette promo. When that red light is on, that guy is a fucking verbal machine. He also had a phenomenal closing statement where he goes, "Don't wrap me up. I have a lot to say. But it just so happens that I'm finished. And so are the Fantastics." Unreal. I never have enough good things to say about Jim Cornette's promos, man. They were unbelievably great. You know who else was unbelievably great? Was Captain Redneck Dick Murdoch. He went out there and maimed Larry Stevens this week. And it was glorious. And even so, even when Dickie's in there wrestling the bottom of the barrel job guys, he's a nice enough guy, he's going to let him get some offense on him. And we all thought Ric Flair was unselfish. I'm not kidding, too. Larry fucking Stevens. He's in there working over Murdoch, hitting him with arm drags, wrestled him to the mat with a headlock takeover at one point. I'm like, what is happening? And of course, all of that precedes Murdoch taking him out to the floor and then bashing his face into the interview podium. whacking him in the spine with a folding chair, running his face into the ring post. Even through all that, he's like, probably should at least let the guy get a couple arm drags on me. I want to be fair, after all. He eventually killed him with a brain buster. And I'll be blunt. I would not trust most people in this business to hit me with a safe brain buster. I'd have taken a brain buster from Dickie 1,000 times before ever letting anybody else try that move on me. And then it was over to the booth for, dare I say, an almost out-of-character Dick Murdoch promo. It was bizarre. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't hollering. You could actually understand every word that came out of his mouth. This was not the promo I was expecting from Dickie this week. No, he just stood there and calmly put over all 23 teams in the Crockett Cup. But every single last one of them is still not capable of putting down Dusty Rhodes for good. Not the Horseman, not Gary Hart, not James E. Cornette, not Kevin Sullivan. None of them know Dusty Rhodes like Dick Murdoch does. 9 years they teamed together. Now, Murdoch knows every last move and every last thought in Dusty's head. And if there's anybody capable of ridding Dusty from the NWA, Murdoch is the man for the job. So everybody else needs to fuck off, basically. I mean, I actually had to rewind it to make sure I was watching the correct timeline here. This was indeed Dick Murdoch in 1988. And he was not a total off-the-cuff lunatic. Couldn't believe I actually got to see a Captain Redneck promo where I understood virtually everything he said. It was like this promo was taking place in a time machine. And it was still awesome. That was the best part. Even when Murdoch was being totally sane, you often forget. He was still an amazing promo. You just weren't used to seeing it too often. So then we came back for Lex Luger versus Art Pritz. The epitome of an athlete wrestling a glorified baked potato with arms and legs. You take one look at Luger, and you look at a guy like Art Pritz, and you're instantly reminded, oh, yeah, that's why it's good to go to the gym. The only thing I wrote down were the following 2 bullet points. Art Pritz's physique. Luger wins with the rack. I think that about covers it all. And then we went to the interview booth where Luger proceeded to do his usual ramble on for about an hour and never get to a point promo. Among many of his scatterbrained thoughts here, he mentioned something about how he and Barry were hanging out on the beach earlier, but then they realized that one of them needed to show up to TBS later to wrestle. So they flipped a coin, and Luger lost. Therefore, he had to go wrestle. So that was a thing, apparently. Only one of them was contractually obligated to show up. But it didn't matter who. So they could flip a coin and figure out who had to go wrestle on TV. And then figure out which one could stay on the beach and tan. I'm not making that up. That was taken almost directly from Luger's mouth. And then he talked in circles about Ric Flair and said he's coming after the World Heavyweight title. This was a very bad promo. Only saved by the mere fact that the people went nuts for him because A, he had muscles, and B, he was glistening with baby oil this week. He might have dumped the whole bottle on him. He was very shiny. But remove those two key components. This was sheer shit. And then we came back for the greatest segment of all time. I'm going to go on record right now when I say this. James J. Dillon, without a doubt, was the single most underrated talent of the mid to late 80s. I love Jim Cornette. He's easily one of my favorite managers of all time. But man, oh man, the more I watch J.J. Dillon on these old Crockett shows, God, he was brilliant. This next segment with him and Jim Crockett, it was incredibly well done. And the end goal in all of it was simple. Make the Weasley heel manager look like a giant Nimrod when all was said and done. Mission accomplished. So JR and Tony pitched to this pre-tape where JJ's meeting with Jim Crockett. He's handcuffed him into a meeting because all the NWA board members are giving him the roundabout and refusing to meet with him. He's had this tape footage in his back pocket to reveal to the world that the Midnight Rider is none other than Dusty Rhodes. So he says he brought his own personal cameraman, along with his own personal VCR to play the footage back. More outdated terminology. But he wants Jim Crockett to see for himself. The Midnight Rider is beyond a shadow of a doubt Dusty Rhodes. So we go to the footage, and we see Magnum TA and the Midnight Rider sitting around the campfire. Ryder's doing his promo, not even trying to conceal the dusty lisp, which is what makes the whole thing genius. Plain as day. Everybody and their dead mother knew it was fucking Dusty. Like, you even see Magnum sitting there smiling and just not even trying to hide the pure absurdity of everything going on here. And of course, we finally go back to JJ and Crockett. And this is where the segment gets great. Because JJ's telling Jim Crockett to recognize the obvious. Clearly, this tape reveals that the Midnight Rider is Dusty Rhodes. To which Crockett looks at JJ and tells him, "We must have been watching different tapes. Because that footage didn't reveal anything." So now JJ is having his patience tested. He tells Crockett that it's clear what needs to happen now. He's going to have to get the Midnight Rider inside a ring for a, quote, sanctioned NWA match. At which point, he's going to rip the mask off in front of God and everybody to prove to the world that the Midnight Rider is in fact Dusty. This was his plan. So Jim looks at him and goes, "Now that would be a good first step." And then JJ's outrage continues as he goes, "And after we get the Midnight Rider in that ring for an officially sanctioned NWA match, and after we pull the mask off and prove that it's Dusty, only then will Dusty be suspended for 1 calendar year for breach of contract." To which Jim Crockett acknowledges, yes, that would be part of the stipulation. So in JJ's mind, he believes that he has now outsmarted the boss. He's peachy as a clam, just rubbing his hands together, enjoying every last moment of this. Even though I, the rational-minded fan watching, am wondering to myself, why in the blue fuck would JJ think that he has to get the Midnight Rider booked in a match in order to pull off his mask? And that's what makes it gloriously stupid. JJ Dillon, the idiot heel manager, came up with a grand idea. He thought, if I get the Midnight Rider booked in a match, and I pull that mask off, and I show it's Dusty, God damn it, I've won. I've got the better of him. Even though every sane, logical person alive is thinking, why does the fucking match matter? Just get the Midnight Rider in the ring, trap him, handcuff him, hog tie him, do whatever you need to do, yank the mask off, and prove that it's Dusty. Why do you need to have a sanctioned match to make that happen? So, folks, damn it all, you'll never guess what happens next. That J.J. Dillon screwed himself. Because Jim Crockett opens up that contract. He reveals that it is an open contract. The Midnight Rider does not have a current opponent booked for the Crockett Cup, so, since Flair's already defending the world title and Tully and Arn are busy with the tournament, well, that really only leaves one suitable challenger for the Midnight Rider, doesn't it, JJ? You. To which JJ, the best line of the entire show, is Jim Crockett pulls out his pen and starts signing the document to write JJ's name on the contract. Tries to weasel out of it by going, oh, geez, sir, I'm going to be awfully busy dealing with the Crockett Cup. Fucking howled. And once the reality set in that JJ is now the Midnight Rider's opponent, he's pissed. Because he realized he just got served by the boss. Best segment of 1988. Hands down. So amazing. J.J. Dillon was undeniably great here. He basically dug his own grave without even realizing it. He concocted this massive grand scheme to get this mask off of Dusty. And in one segment, the owner of the company just turned it all around on him. This is fucking pro wrestling, dude. Outstanding. When the heels were made out to look like complete fools, and they constantly put their foot in their mouth. This gets many, many thumbs up. However many thumbs a human being can possibly have at one time, it gets all of them. Brilliant. Then we came back for the Powers of Pain versus, as I wrote here, two indecipherable job guys that did not get graphics shown. I had no idea who they were. I think Shivani mentioned one of them was Steve Atkinson. The other, I have no idea. I've probably seen him 1,000 times on this show before. Couldn't pick him out of a police lineup. So the Warlord and the Barbarian killed him. I did laugh at one point. Ivan Koloff just started beating the shit out of one of the job guys with a Russian chain. And then to add insult to injury, Paul Jones went over to admonish him by tapping him on the shoulder with his club and saying, "Hey, get back in the ring." Peak comedy. And eventually the Barbarian gave the guy a power slam off the second rope for the pin. They actually blatantly stole that move from the Road Warriors because they used to use that exact same move. Guess it was kind of fitting. And then we went to the booth where Paul Jones informed us that he's got 2 chances to win the '88 Crockett Cup this year. If the Powers of Pain can't get the job done, he's also got Ivan Koloff and Dickie Murdoch on standby to pick up the scraps. Way to bury your lead muscles, Paul. The only other thing I got out of this was Paul Jones stating that Dick Murdoch smells. And when Dickie smells, you best believe him. If Dickie smells, you best believe him. I don't know what the fuck that means. Was that conversation supposed to go somewhere entirely different? What the fuck was Paul Jones talking about here? If Dick Murdoch smells, we better believe it. Sure. We'll go with that. And then it was back to the ring for a match I am not making up. This is what the graphic read. The Varsity Club versus Dave Spearman and Dark Star. Dark Star. First name Dark. Last name Star. No relation, by the way. I just want to point that out. And, going by that alone, I'll give you one guess as to what the skin pigment was. It was funny here. Casually in the middle of the match, JR drew attention to the back of Steiner's singlet that read, Dog-Faced Gremlin. And because they had not yet established that nickname, all Tony Schiavone said was, well, that's bizarre. Subtle remarks from Mr. Schiavone here in 1988. So Rick and Mike took their times working these guys over. They went into their break spot, heading into hour 2. And they came back, wrestled for a few more minutes. And then Rich just kind of dumped Spearman on the back of his neck with a German and killed him. And pinned him. But he also may have been deceased. Still not really sure yet. It was all highly more entertaining than the Varsity Club promo that followed. Remember earlier how I was talking about Luger's nonsensical rambling promo? How he stood there and talked in circles for about an hour, seemingly about nothing? Well, Kevin Sullivan apparently took one look at that promo and said, hold my beer, brother. I'll show you rambling. This guy fucking rambled. I have no earthly clue what he was getting at. In fact, let me just read you everything I jotted down. Something about the Prince of Darkness death match. Something about Jimmy Garvin and Patty, a.k.a. Precious. Something about the Midnight Rider. He says that nobody is taking the situation seriously. Tully and Arn are pacing around in the background very impatiently. Rick Steiner is playing with his earmuffs. Mike Rotunda casually interjects, hey, pay attention. They may have been geared toward me, I have no idea. Camera begins to glitch out. Promo is still going. Why on earth have they not cut the video feed yet? Oh my God, this fucking sucks, move on. Hideous television. Absolutely hideous. Then we finally got Tully and Arn versus Tony Bowen and Ricky Paradise. Another name I'm not making up, by the way. Ricky Paradise. Sounds like a porn name. It was the most paint by numbers horseman squash you've ever seen. Tully and Arn took turns doing some moves. Tully shook his hips around and showboated for the crowd. And then Arn came in and clean shop. Gave Bowen the worst AA spine buster I've ever seen. And then Tully won with the slingshot. And then coming back, we had JJ, Tully, and Arn at the booth. And this was so great. You got one of these things going on here where a guy is trying to cut a promo, but you can't pay attention to anything he's saying because there's somebody else on the screen drawing attention to themselves. That is what Tully was doing while JJ was trying to talk here. He's going over the whole timeline from earlier. You know, Jim Crockett trying to handcuff JJ into the match with the Midnight Rider and the Bull Rope match, blah, blah. And I'm watching Tully here. At one point, he just grabs a crumpled up piece of paper and starts playing with it. And then he drops it. Tries to casually pick it up without drawing attention to himself. Then he's tapping JJ on the shoulder and whispering stuff in his ear. I'm like, I mean, this guy's totally given up. He is officially in clock in, clock out mode. And then when Tully finally gets to chime in, he cuts himself off mid-promo to mock Nikita Koloff in the ring, saying that he should have stayed retired, joking about how his big muscles have only gotten him so far. This is just total fuck-off segment for Tully. I mean, he wasn't even trying to be remotely serious here. And then, of course, Arn gets on there and preaches about how great the Horsemen are. And then everything gets serious again. If you really think about it, Double A and Tully were like the perfect pairing. You don't really think of it much outside their matches, but during their promos together, they were such polar opposite personalities. I mean, you just realize how great they were together. Arn was the total counterbalance to Tully's snide attitude. And it worked. That's the best part. So then Nikita beat El Negro in fairly short order. Nikita's lost about 50 pounds of muscle mass since the last time we saw him, which I believe was approximately 1 week. I mean, Negro easily doubled him in size. And, now Nikita still won with the sickle in about 90 seconds. I mean, you almost kind of forget it's Nikita until you see him hit the Russian sickle at the end. And you're like, oh yeah, that's him. He looks like a dude. And then you get to hear him do a promo afterwards. That's definitely where you recognize it's Nikita. He's talking about the Crockett Cup, saying that 1 year ago he and Dusty won the Crockett Cup. And while it would mean the world to win it again with him this year, Jim Crockett gave Nikita a secondary option to go with, an open contract for a World Heavyweight title match with Ric Flair. So Nikita signed on the dotted line, told Flair not to worry what kind of plane or limo he was going to ride into Greenville in, tells him not to worry about what kind of clothes he's going to wear for the occasion. All he has to worry about is stepping into that ring and defending the world title against a hungry, fired-up athlete. It's now time to prove who the best is. And it's not the luxury items that's going to determine that. It is the squared circle that will determine that. Yep. Still Nikita. He's got hair now. By golly, though, that guy could still cut a hell of a promo. Broken English and all. And indeed, that was the mystery leftover from last week. A little cliffhanger deal. Would Nikita find a replacement partner for the '88 Crockett Cup? or would he sign a contract to wrestle for the World Heavyweight title? Well, now it's settled. A long-time rivalry revisited. We'll see if it has the same fire like it did in November of '86 in the build-up to Starrcade. Then we came back for gorgeous Jimmy Garvin and Larry Davis. They wrestled for a few minutes. I was bored to tears. And Garvin won with a horrible-looking brainbuster. It's literally all I cared to write about it. He did have some good lines in his promo afterwards. Standing there at the booth talking to Kevin Sullivan, referring to him as a, quote, sick individual. A wanton individual. Then he followed up that barn burner of a statement with, you can hijack a man's car, maybe get arrested, maybe not. You can burn down a man's house. Maybe he'll get a little agitated with you. A little agitated, you say? Huh. Gonna have some conversations with victims of arson. Sir, are you a little irritated by this mild inconvenience? So after we established all that, you can hijack a man's car, you can burn down a man's house. That's one thing. But the bottom line, you don't fuck with a man's wife. That's right. Steal a man's car, commit arson. Well, that'll get you a slap on the wrist in most places. But by God, you try to hit on a man's wife. That's sacrilege right there, brother. You ever realize how fucking stupid wrestling is sometimes? Oh, and by the way, while we're on the subject, have they bothered to yet explain what a Prince of Darkness deathmatch is? They keep referencing it. Have they tried explaining what the rules are so the audience understands what the hell they're talking about? Or is that going to be like a TNA thing where they'll have JR come out right before the match and go, it's really quite simple. And they'll throw up like 8 different captions to try to explain how everything works. So, then we had the Fantastics versus Alan Martin and Keith Steinborn. It's almost incredible to believe. They continually serve up the dirt worst of all the NWA jobbers for these guys week after week. But by God, they're professionals. Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton say, no. We are determined to get a good match out of these clowns. They come close. The matches are no good. But the Fantastics do not half-ass it in these studio squashes. They put those working boots on and go to town. I love the spot here where Rogers went to kick Steinborn in the gut so Fulton could come off the ropes and hit him with a knee strike. But Steinborn already took the bump onto his stomach. So Fulton had to hit the ropes, run full speed towards Steinborn, and then realizing that he was down on his stomach like an idiot, he just kicked him in the upper back with the point of his boot. Again, they're pros. They did some decent-looking double-team offense. I mean, as decent as they can make it for wrestling 2 complete ham and eggers. And then they finally went over with the rocket launcher. The day will come where the Fantastics finally get to wrestle Mike Jackson. I'm convinced the bar can't get much lower with the local job guys. Then we come back from break for a White Meat Fantastics babyface promo. Their go-to line is very simple. Whenever they lose their train of thought, all they have to do is start putting over the nice people in the crowd. And they get that giant babyface pop. The women in particular are very proud to get acknowledged by the Fantastics. This was not their best work, admittedly. Bobby Fulton's comeback to all of Jim's previous comments about his mother were, Jim Cornette, I didn't bring your mother into this, so leave my mama out of it. Attaboy, Bobby. Stand up for yourself. That'll show him. Tommy's promo was a little bit better. He says that after 26 years on this planet and 4 years running his Yap and Crockett promotions, the Fantastics are going to give Jim Cornette a receipt that he'll never forget. A lashing that his mama should have given him when he came out of the womb. Oh, by the way, totally random thought, but Tommy Rogers brought it up here, so I will mention it. The phrase, we're like a fine watch. We take a lickin', but we keep on tickin'. Is that not the dumbest fucking simile you've ever heard in your life? Who came up with that? It's awful. Speaking of awful, Al Perez wrestled Ryan Wagner. I think I fell asleep. Al Perez won with a spinning toe hold. And the only reason I remember that was because JR called it. Had he not uttered the move spinning toe hold, I'd have probably forgotten this match was even on the show. Fucking 2+ hours in. And they're subjecting me to an Al Perez match where he puts me into a coma in the last 5 minutes of remaining airtime. And then they follow that up with a Gary Hart promo. Al Perez was there, just kind of being useless. The only thing I noted was Gary's comments about the Midnight Rider being, and I quote, a scummy, lying, juicy, freaking dog. Only Gary Hart could have pulled off calling somebody juicy and not sounding gay. And if you thought my comments on that Al Perez match were brief, check out my notes for this next match. Again, keep in mind, we're almost to the end of the show. It's the home stretch. The match is Ricky Santana versus the Gladiator. My notes read, Ricky Santana versus the Gladiator. Fuck you, I'm done. Ricky won with the diving splash. And that is how I closed out my Crockett notes for the week. Apparently they were obligated to fill 2 hours this go-around. So they had to kill a bunch of airtime at the end there. Show was still a lot of fun. That J.J. Dillon Jim Crockett pre-tape was classic shit, man. It's so beyond preposterous. Everything they're doing with the Midnight Rider, on the surface, it really shouldn't be working. But it's dusty. And everybody loves seeing the heels look like jackasses. And, the Crockett Cup is kind of reaching max capacity at this point. I mean, they've done just about everything to generate excitement there. Now they're trying to fill the gaps with some of the other main event matches. But after we get through the Crockett Cup, it is smooth sailing into bash season. And then the fall comes. And it is a royal downhill plummet. Meanwhile, Midsouth has the inverse effect. I mean, these shows continue to get better and better as the weeks and months go by. In 1983, I keep saying, was barely the tipping point. 84 is the year I'm really looking forward to. But, well, they kind of laid out the gauntlet from the beginning of this week's taping block. With the one-night tournament in the rear view, the North American title still being held up as of now, we have a new agenda on the mind of General Skandar Akbar. Earlier in the day, he had issued an impromptu press conference with Reeser Bowden so he could make his next big announcement. He is willing to put up $25,000 for an opportunity at the Midsouth tag titles, but there is a twist with the contractual stipulation. Provided Midsouth approves the match, Akbar would not have to reveal who his partners were going to be because he wanted to keep it top secret. So after the paperwork was signed and the match was made official, the idea here is that everybody would assume that his two men would be Kamala and the Black Ninja, but it is a swerve. Instead, his two choices for the match were Mr. Olympia and Ted DiBiase, which I'm sure drove Hacksaw Duggan up a wall when he saw this. After him making it known that the Rat Pack does not do business with foreign adversaries, that slimeball Ted. And now he's in a working agreement with the devil himself, General Akbar. And of course, DiBiase comes in to explain that Duggan took it upon himself to, cough cough, fire Matt Bourne from the Rat Pack after their little altercation a few weeks back. Fire. Yeah, if you know anything about Matt Bourne's history, you can read between the lines there and figure out what that means. But DiBiase informs us that he's still the leader of the group, and he admires Mr. Olympia's loyalty, a man that was swept aside when he took the bullet for Wrestling 2. This part of the interview was great. They finally give Olympia the chance to chime in. And of course, he's going over the whole Wrestling 2 timeline. He mentions the North American title being held up and how it makes it more difficult for him because, well, it's taking money out of his pocket. And while Olympia's just in the middle of this heel tirade, you can kind of tell they're giving him the Iggy off camera to wrap everything up. So without missing a beat, Ted jumps right in, finishes the promo for Olympia. Olympia doesn't even try to butt in again, just stands there totally silent. And then Reeser Bowden looks right at the camera and desperately tries not to smile. An epic opening segment. And again, tying up a lot of loose ends with previous story material. Now, they didn't outright acknowledge that the Rat Pack is no longer a thing, but DiBiase pretty much made the point. Duggan turned his back on the team, and now DiBiase is turning his focus on more important matter. So that was all well done. And as we set the stage for that showdown later on, we go to the ring for King Kong Bundy versus Kelly Kiniski. The joy that overcame me when I found out that Kiniski was about to get smashed by King Kong Bundy. Oh, you have no idea. I almost popped. It was a beautiful 90-second squash. Bundy chucked Kelly around like a football, beat the shit out of him, and then he got the win with a big splash. If only they could have made it a best-of-7 series. I'd have loved to see Bundy kill this guy for 4 straight matches on TV. But that led into the second match. Wild Bill Irwin versus the Junkyard Dog. The Battle of the Bull Rope versus the Dog Collar Chain. It was a slightly more believable standoff than the Chain versus Black Ninja's Kendo Stick. And of course, Bill Watts took the time to address the tournament finals in New Orleans, since Dog wrestled in the finals there. mentioning that the reason the North American title was being held up was because Dog was pinned on his stomach. So, just more recap material here. Not much to say about the action. I did like Dog completely no-selling Irwin's pump kick and then just firing back with a clothesline like 3 seconds later. And then he ended up going over with a thumper. Another little softball serve up to give Dog a TV win. He is progressively getting slower and slower with each match. I mean, from the time we started doing these Mid-South reviews, man, even just going into the beginning of 83, remember there was that 60-day window where Dog was gone from TV, and he was doing the Stagger Lee gimmick under the giant bodysuit. I have no idea how much eating the Dog had been doing during that 2-month absence, but there was a lot of it involved. It went from, I can see your six-pack abs to, well, at least his arms are still relatively big. His stomach is another matter entirely. And it only gets worse from here. The steady decline of Dog's health and all that motivation he lost, pretty much up through his departure in 84. I mean, we're seeing it in real time. It is a sad state of affairs. So prior to the Mid-South Tag title match, we got to hear Wrestling 2 and Tiger Conway Jr.'s response, now that they know who their opponents are. And this interview was truly something special. You get both men standing there in well-dressed suits, looking very professional. Conway Jr. looked like he was ready for a funeral. Black suit, black tie, white shirt. Very stern and very laid back. And this is just so awesome. So Reeser gets Conway's comments first. And, we all know Tiger Conway Jr. Very soft-spoken guy. Not the most animated personality on camera. He's talking about how it's an honor to defend the Mid-South tag belts. He's got some unsettled business to handle with General Akbar after last time they crossed paths. And then Reeser turns to Wrestling 2. His first comment, he goes, Ted DiBiase and Mr. Olympia are a very formidable tag team. And there's grumpy Mr. Wrestling 2 immediately firing back with, how do you know? These two saps haven't proven a damn thing. He's just laying into these guys. I mean, you could see the smoke coming out of every hole in Wrestling 2's body. He's so pissed off. And I'm dying of laughter the whole time. Because you see Tiger Conway Jr. off to the side, just cradling one half of the Mid-South tag titles. And meanwhile, you got this crazy old loon bat on the other side, standing like 5 feet next to him, just ranting up a storm. God, it was so amazing. I can't praise it enough. Wrestling 2 is the best, man. Whether he was a miserable, fired-up, pissed-off babyface or a miserable, fired-up, pissed-off heel, there literally was never a difference in tonality. It was the same guy. Just your average, disgruntled, angry old man that would kick your ass and enjoy every minute of it. Gotta love it. Old school wrestling at its finest. Then we had Hacksaw Butch Reed versus Frank Levert. Quick little showcase for Butch Reed. Frank was every pale, out-of-shape job guy you ever saw throughout the 80s. Reed worked him over for a few minutes. Frank got more and more blown up the longer the match went. I'm convinced that Reed was just kind of fucking around with him by the end. He did like 4 Irish whip spots in a row, By the fourth round, Frank was basically just walking toward the ropes and back. He was so out of breath. And then Regis hit him with a shoulder tackle and pinned him. Yeah, I take it cardio is not something Frank will ever prioritize during his training. Training. Air quotes around that. But let's quit beating around the bush. Let's talk about the Mid-South Tag Title match. Mr. Olympia and Ted DiBiase, Akbar's handpicked team, going up against Mr. Wrestling 2 and Tiger Conway Jr. $25,000 on the line, in addition to the belts. Man, what a great match this was. All action-packed. No wasted motion. I mean, there were so many layers to what was going on here. You had all the early stuff where the baby faces are running wild and not giving an inch. You know, heels are cowering in their corner and constantly retreating. You know, Wrestling 2 gets a modicum of revenge on Olympia by getting physical with him here. But they didn't overdo the physicality. Handful of punches, couple arm drags, and Olympia ducks out of the ring and keeps stalling. And of course, the dynamics of 2 and Conway work so well because Conway's the perfect babyface in peril. So you get him selling for long periods of time while the heels are double teaming him. You know, Wrestling 2's getting in there and firing up on both guys. I always love with Wrestling 2, even when he's at the numbers disadvantage, he always somehow manages to get the better of both heels. And all he has to do is go in there and flail his arms around and throw haymakers. He'll evidently catch someone in the face. But, well, the big angle is Akbar getting involved on the ring apron to distract Alfred Neely during a pinfall attempt from Conway. And they kept milking the big hot tag spot for Wrestling 2. And eventually you get the deal at the end where Conway's back in there working with Olympia. DiBiase runs a distraction so that Wrestling 2 and Neely are off dealing with him. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ring, you see Akbar feed a gimmick to Olympia so he can put it on the heel of his boot. Actually, I think it was the toe of his boot. And he's loading up the gimmick, so to speak, so that he can catch Conway with a drop kick. And it knocks Conway out cold. So the heels manage to escape with the belts and the money. You know, and of course, Wrestling 2 never saw the loaded gimmick on Olympia's foot, so he's confused as to what happened. You know, he's trying to revive Conway, and obviously Conway's selling it like he's out cold. It was really fantastic. Great closing angle. I'm not entirely sure what the object was supposed to be. Just kind of looked like a headband that Olympia attached to his ankle. Not exactly sure how you load a headband. Unless it had a magnet or a piece of metal lodged inside of it. I know, suspension of disbelief. But like, even watching it here, I'm like, okay, what exactly was the gimmick that Akbar was supposed to pass off to him? Because it did not look all that devastating. But it was a hot match. Great action. Packed a lot of stuff into a very short window. And while we wait to hear an update on everything, obviously we have new heel champions for the time being. And then we come back for more tag action. Significantly less energetic than the Mid-South Tag Title match. It is Mike Jackson and Art Cruz versus Kamala and the Black Ninja. Tell you what, man, Skandar Akbar had balls of steel to show his face after that previous match. Honestly, I was just expecting Wrestling 2 to hit the ring as soon as the bell rang. Try to go right after this motherfucker for that trick he just pulled. There was a great moment in this match. Right before the heels cut off Cruz and Jackson in the last minute, Cruz is in there with Kendo Nagasaki, and he's trying to cover up from the chops, try to get Jackson back in the ring. So in order to break away from Kendo's offense, he just winds up and pops this fucking dude right in the jaw as hard as humanly possible. I mean, it was so loud, it got a reaction from Bill Watts and Boyd Pierce. And it was made funnier, too, by the fact that as soon as Cruz punched him in the jaw, he did not waste motion. He ran as fast as he could to tag in Mike Jackson. He was basically like, all right, dude, all yours. I mean, he's going to fucking kill you, but I'll just be out here on the apron protecting myself. Good luck. And indeed, Kendo cut off Mike Jackson with a thrust kick and laid him out. And then Kamala came in and hit him with a splash to pin him a few seconds later. I had to imagine it was a worked punch and that R-Cruz didn't actually potato him. But you never know. He may have legitimately caught Kendo in the mouth with the right hand. And in that case, that man is lucky to be alive. So that left us with a couple quick standby matches to fill out the remaining airtime. Rip Rogers and Randy Barber was up first. Rip was sporting his magenta-colored ring tights for the occasion here. This one only went like a minute before Rogers went with an inside cradle. And then the other standby was Tim Horner versus newcomer Tony Zane. Holy shit. My man, Tony Zane. I miss talking about Tony Zane on those Crockett reviews. The walking black and blue mark that he was. I actually forgot he did jobs in Midsouth early in his career. I laughed to myself here because, when they first showed him on camera, my first thought was, he looks a lot smaller here in 1983. And he was still pale, fat, and way out of shape. No doubt he definitely ballooned up a few years later. By the time he was doing jobs on Crockett TV, that man was rotund. But it was his first time making an appearance here, so I guess they didn't want to beat him immediately. They ran out the clock with this one. Kind of let him test the waters with Tim Horner and see what he could do. I mean, he really didn't have time to showcase himself. Did a couple takedowns. There were a few mat wrestling holds, but it was all general stuff. I think we'll be seeing more of Tony Zane on Mid-South, so never fret. Trust me, next time he's on camera, you won't even recognize him. He'll probably have like 8 additional bruises in 8 different spots on his body. All in all, the show was mainly centered around the tag title match. Everything else I would say was just kind of void filler. But the title match itself was fantastic. It's everything you'll love about the Mid-South formula. Exciting action, logical layout, no downtime or wasted motion. Packing everything into a reasonable window without drawing shit out unnecessarily. It's great stuff, man. It really is. And now for our weekly 5-second recap of World Class. Well, all right then. That wraps up this report, folks. See you next time. All right, fine. We'll talk about the show. Not that there's much to talk about, but I'm going to do it anyway. For the people. It is our weekly reminder that as we're gearing up for Texas Stadium in approximately 2 weeks, they have done next to nothing in terms of actually generating excitement for this show. It's a far cry from the year before when the first annual David Memorial Special actually had more enthusiasm from the crowd. Which is ironic because, it was only a few months after David's passing. But again, I always reflect back on that show and think, the event had a lot more genuine, authentic excitement about it. Mostly because I think the Dallas fans had it in the back of their heads that Kerry was about to win the NWA World Championship. I don't think people put that same faith that Kevin was going to do the same thing this year. I will say one thing about the show. they're almost worthwhile just to hear Mark Lorenz's ring introductions for the one-man gang. This is a direct quote. Already in the ring and totally out of control. It's the one-man gang. Delivered with about that same level of passion. God, he really is like the Reeser Bowden of the Dallas territory. Lorenz can't even pretend to buy into the idea that this shit is real. It's amazing. Then a few seconds later, he immediately buries Terry Daniels by going, out on the floor, cowering in fear, already shitting his pants because he's about to get his ass maimed. It's Terry Daniels. And you'll be quite shocked to hear, well, the gang killed poor Terry Daniels. That brief little window in 84, I think it was, where they actually tried to give Terry Daniels a bit of a push in Mid-South in the mid-card. Yeah, not here in 85. He was the outright jobber in every sense of the word. But gang took a minute to beat him into powder. Half the fight was him dumping Daniels out to the floor and then running him into the ring post. And the finish was great. Gang drops a fist over Terry's chest, but then he stands up and goes, no, that is not sufficient enough. I must ensure that this man is down for the count. So I will drop an elbow across his chest. That'll keep him down for good. Maybe his elbow was loaded, who knows? Might have been taking the Luger approach where he spends the majority of his career working the loaded elbow gimmick from the metal plates he had installed after the motorcycle accident. So, yeah, that was the opening to the show. And then we come back for arguably one of the more infamous moments of Jim Cornette's career. It was by far the low point of his world-class run. I honestly don't even know how to begin breaking this down. Well, first of all, let's get the obvious out of the way. I believe it is our first time seeing Ken Mantell out in the public sphere addressing the Dallas crowd. And I can only pray to God it'll be the last. Listening to Ken Mantell try to explain stipulation matches for cards, it's about as exciting to watch as his week-to-week booking. Drier than a nun's cunt, to keep it moderately PG. So I'll go ahead and spare you the riveting monotone personality here. Mantell makes it clear that the American tag titles will be decided at Texas Stadium, but because of Jim Cornette's constant interference in the previous two title matches, he will now be barred from ringside for that match. So as you might imagine, Cornette was not too pleased with that announcement, so he decided to chime in and give Mantell a piece of his mind, saying that he refuses to let his boys wrestle this match unless he can be down at ringside to interfere. I mean, cheer for his boys. So after already spending like 3 minutes establishing the stipulation where Cornette was banned from ringside, well then Bobby Fulton jumps on the microphone and goes, actually no, we'll go ahead and change that stipulation because we have the power to do so apparently. Cornette, you can come down and you can watch the match at ringside because we've got somebody on our team that's going to prevent you from getting involved. And his name? Little John. Yes. Little John. I think everybody knew what was coming. Sure enough, the Fantastics had Little John on standby. And as he begins to make his way down the ring through the crowd, Bill fucking Mercer, pointing out the obvious for everybody that's watching at home, the highlight of the show, he just bluntly goes, well, that is clearly not a midget. And indeed, he was right. Little John was, in fact, well over 7 feet. I believe they said 7'7" here. That seems a little exaggerated. 7'2", 7'3", I can maybe buy. 7'7". I mean, I've seen Giant Gonzalez in action. I don't think this Little John quite matched that height. I just love the politically incorrect bluntness in his delivery. Confirmed, folks. Not a midget. And yes, Jim has recounted this story many times on his podcast. I'm sure most of his avid listeners have heard the story in some form or fashion. I think he actually might have a really old clip archived on YouTube, recapping this very segment, in fact. It was... it was only a precursor to what actually happened at the Texas Stadium event. You could smell the inbound nightmare just looking at how all this went down. It's funny. I don't think I've ever seen that Texas Stadium match with the whole Little John angle. The 85 Texas Stadium show is not renowned for being a classic event, so there's not a lot of footage out there. Provided they replay some of those matches on delay, I'm very intrigued to see if they actually bother airing the footage of that tag title match, because, I could use a good laugh. I'll be honest with you. There were so many red flags that went off during this 4 to 5 minute segment. I can't wait to see what the blow-off is. Because, again, I have no memory of ever seeing that Texas Stadium match. Of all the Fantastics Midnight's matches I've seen in my lifetime, that one does not stand out. But as we await that in train wreck, we had a quick pre-tape here with the returning Fabulous Freebirds. They're going to be back in Dallas for the David Memorial event. And they're going to be part of that massive 2-ring tag team battle royal they're doing. And this is where they confirmed that they will be teaming with the Von Erichs. It was a bitter pill to swallow for the Freebirds, but everybody knows their history. And even though a lot of that is in the past, the Freebirds want to make sure that their partners are just as good as they are. So the Von Erichs are a safe bet. And of course, during all this, you got Mark Lorenz trying to drive a wedge in there by talking about how not only is there $100,000 at stake, so they're evidently going to have to divide that money up, but there is also a new car. But only one team can win the car. So you got Hayes doing the promo, basically saying, well, that's fine, we'll team with the Von Erichs. Just as long as they understand that the Freebirds are the ones that are leaving with the new Lincoln Continental and they're leaving empty-handed. Because even when the Freebirds are quote-unquote baby faces, they still got to get those douchey jabs in there where they can. But this is all great. I love Buddy Roberts at the end trying to coerce Hayes into letting him take it for a spin. And Hayes is like, the fuck you're taking this new car for a test drive? Out of here with that shit. But it was an awesome promo. I can never put over Hayes enough on the stick. It's good to see these guys back in Dallas, if only for a short window. And that led into the Freebirds' next match here at the Sportatorium. They wrestled Ed Thomas and Thor. Specifically, it was Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes in action for the Freebirds. And in one episode, this show epitomized how empty it has been without the Freebirds around on a full-time basis. I mean, for what little actually happened in this match, God, the people reacted to everything like it was the fucking main event of WrestleMania Night 1. I mean, they were giving the Freebirds the Rock babyface treatment here. And it was so funny, too, because, I mean, Thor worked the entire match for his team. Ed Thomas never tagged in one time. His only involvement was illegally trying to hit the ring to blindside Gordy, at which point he tripped over the middle rope trying to get into the ring. Just kind of stumbled into the Freebirds' corner so he could eat a right hand. Of course, he didn't sell it. So that guy clearly had no idea what he was doing. But the Freebirds took their time working the crowd energy. They beat up Thor for a while. Gave him a little offense here and there, but nothing monumental. And then Gordy ended up going over with the Oriental Spike. It is, it's amazing what a little time away can change in terms of fans' perception. All those years we watched on Dallas TV where the Freebirds were enemy number one. And all it took was one handshake between Gordy and Kerry to patch up all the differences and let bygones be bygones. Now the people react to them like they're the most beloved wrestlers of all time. It's going to suck when they go away again, and we're going to be right back to the old status quo of world-class mid-level roster. But it was a fun little showcase squash. And in the TV main event, it is Gino Hernandez versus Kevin Von Erich. I think they were a little pressed for time trying to get the match going because Kevin's doing his rapid-fire autograph signatures at ringside. And you could see Lorenz walk over to him and sort of give him the sign to wrap it up. Action was still good, though. A lot of the early stuff was Kevin out-wrestling Gino, and, Gino kept rolling out to the floor to stall for time. He had Chris Adams trying to run interference, and that finally prompted Bronco to eject him from ringside. He didn't get to do the over-dramatic WWE wind-up where he screams, "You're out of here!" He just kind of waved him to the back and threatened to disqualify Gino. And they did some more basic stuff for a few minutes. Gino blocked the claw attempt and then raked Kevin in the eyes to get some heat. But after Gino missed a crossbody out of the corner, Kevin went up and connected with a crossbody of his own and got the 3 count. Then he slapped on the claw on Gino during the post-match brawl. Very simple stuff. I think for a lot of hardcores, they would immediately shit on a match like this because 50% of it was Gino stalling. But what we saw was fine. Kevin is obviously the poster boy for the Texas Stadium event, so having him go over was kind of a given. It's still not really doing much to generate excitement for the Flair-Kevin title match. I mean, that program's been mentioned in passing along the way, but without any kind of meaningful promo or angle to build it up on TV, it's hard to really get excited about that match. It has nowhere near the level of hype that the Kerry match had in '84. But, all in all, I would say the show was mainly about reintroducing the Freebirds to the Dallas area. Likewise, inserting the Little John stipulation for the tag title match. I mean, that angle in and of itself was worth checking out. If not just to sort of validate Cornette's comments about it being an astronomically horrible idea. And for Bill Mercer's comments, that is not a midget. Clearly. I mean, the show wasn't a total waste of time, just it's kind of like a lot of world-class shows. There's just not a whole lot to write home about. They're 40-something minute programs. They don't really do a lot to move the needle. And that's just kind of the state of where we are with world-class in '85. It's a trickle downhill effect from here on out. So, Yeah, I kind of wrap the show up from there. As always, I appreciate people that come back to watch the podcast every Monday and Friday. We will be back on Monday for the regular Monday format. We got Retro Raw, Retro NXT. I'll watch a little bit of SmackDown and see if there's anything worth talking about in great detail. But I think that format seems to be working a lot better for me, so we're going to stick with it. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and I'll catch you all soon. Take care. Peace out.